Hello, my name is Kevin Schrader. I'm the Technology Evangelist for Zend Technologies. And if you've been watching some things a little bit lately, you'll have seen that we have a press release for an announcement for a new product with Adobe. It's called Adobe Flash Builder for PHP. What it basically does is allows you to build a front-end, very graphically rich interface and connect in very easily with a PHP backend system. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a little bit of a dive here just to show how you can kind of go from start to finish in building that actually out. We have a small example already on our website, but this one's going to take that similar example, and we're going to start from the ground up and build pretty much everything straight out. So I've got my copy here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to New, go to Other, and I'm going to select Flex Mobile and PHP Project. This will create the two projects that we need to be able to do the communication between the two. And I'm going to set up my URL here to connect in with my local machine. So whether I'm on my mobile device or on my local machine, we'll be able to connect in with that. We'll click on Next, and we'll call this one States. And we're going to select a view-based application. This will allow us to do a simple scroller and a little bit of a click here and there. So just a very basic application. You can definitely get much more much more complex, but we're just going to be going for a little bit of a basic one here. So let's click on Finish, and this will create the two projects. So the first thing that we have here, we have our mobile project. I'm going to open up the States PHP because what I want to do first is create the individual objects that I need. We've got a couple of folders here. We've got the library folder and the services folder. The library is where you're going to be putting things like any kind of classes that you need to have to actually build out functionality, any value objects that you need to create, whereas the services are there to provide the endpoint for what you're trying to connect in with. So I'll start with the library. I'm going to create a new file here. I'm going to call it state. This is going to be a value object, which basically is a properties only type of a class, which represents the data that exists on your server side. So I'll create that file and then create a public abbrev. Of course, I'm writing in PHP here. Public name and public capital. Now these correspond to columns that we have in our database. I've already created them. We're not going to worry that much about them. But before we move on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some PHP doc. The reason for this is that the introspector, the introspective functionality in Flash Builder for PHP will look at the PHP doc to determine both return types as well as property types. So we're going to call this a string because it basically is. It can be either complex types, like an object, or simple types like string, integer, boolean, things of that nature. So that's all we need here. This creates our value object for us. Now what we want to do is we want to create our service. The service is what's going to be used to actually provide access. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to create a new PHP file. And I call it state service. We're going to create a new class, and then what we'll do is we'll create a new function called getStates. And in here, what we'll do is we'll just create our database access. So PDO equals new PDO, and we MySQL. DB name is state info. I'll leave it state info. Of course, I'm all about security here, so root and no password. Of course, I have to do that properly. And then I create a statement equals PDO query. Select star from state info. Actually, this is wrong. I believe this is states. And then we'll do a return statement, fetch all, and it will be PDO fetch class, and the class will be state. Like we did before, is we'll create a PHP doc. We'll say we're going to return an array of state. This is pretty much all we need to write for ourselves on the PHP side for just a basic example of this. So now what we want to do is flip over to our Flash perspective, and we're going to right-click now on that stateservice.php file, and we're going to click on Create PHP Service for Flex. This is one of the really cool integration points that we have there. It will look at this, it'll introspect it, and it will create that service so that we can access it on the front end side. So we see it's going to return an array of state, and it's going to be calling the method getStates. So we'll click on Finish. And we now have that service defined down here. So if we want to, we can also test this service. We can right-click on there and go Test Operation. We'll click on Test. And you'll see that we have, I'm guessing 51, just 50. 50 of our results here, all of the proper types. So we have our service now set up and actually running. So we've actually pretty much got the PHP side working. We've got the integration point side working. Now what we need to do is actually build this onto our Flex side. So I'll go to the design view for this home view. I'll give it a better name. Let's call it States. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag an individual list onto this view here. And I'm going to set the height at 100% and the width at 100%. Now what I can do is I'm going to go to my data and services view here. I'm going to click and drag that directly onto here, and I'll get to make some set some of the options here. So I'm going to select basically just the label field. I want it to be just the name, just because we're just going to be having up a list here. So I can click on OK. And with that, I'll save it and create a new run configuration by right-clicking on the state.mxml, and I click on Run as Mobile PHP Application. Now what I need to do is I need to first of all set up the launch method. I'm going to be running it on Google Android. I'm going to specify that it's going to be on the desktop, and I'm just going to emulate my phone. Click on Apply, and then click on Run. And we see that we've now got our data in our session here. So I'll close that out, because what we also want to do is we want to show you some of the debugging features. Now we're not going to be showing the debugging on the Flex side. I mean, that's easy. Everybody knows that you can debug the application that you're running on. What's really cool is that now we can actually debug the application that's on the server side. So in other words, we can now debug the PHP. So I'll go into here, into my PHP file, select a breakpoint, and this time I'm going to select that I'm going to debug states again. But this time, we see now that the application has stopped running in the getStates function, and I have all my PHP variables, all that kind of stuff available here, but nothing yet on the mobile application itself. So I'll hit F8 to continue. You now see that we have all of our states up and running here. Pretty easy to do. But as good as emulation is, it's not always going to do exactly what you want. It's not going to have everything that you would have on a normal device. So what I'm going to do instead this time is I'm going to go to Run Configurations, and this time I'm going to say I'm going to run it on the device. Now my device is set up in debug mode, in developer mode, and so what that allows me to do is to actually control parts of the device from my desktop here. So I basically have it plugged in to my USB cable. I'm going to hit Apply, and I'm going to hit Run. Now this will take a little bit of time to get up and running for the first time, but we see now we have our application running here with all of the states in there. So I'll close that out, because like I said, it's, just being able to run something like that is pretty cool, but what's really cool is being able to actually debug it. So I'm going to debug the states directly from my mobile phone here by setting up the session here, which will then initiate that on the device. We see that we're waiting for the debugger connection. And now we have our application here sitting on our breakpoints, and we're doing the same thing that we did before, but we're running based off of the mobile device instead of off of the desktop. So I hit F8, and now we have our data running on our phone. So with that, that's a little bit of a deeper dive. This is going to be released in the next little while. This is really some cool stuff here going on. If you want to do any kind of mobile-enabled application, and using Adobe Flash Builder for PHP is going to be a great way to make that whole transition much easier.